Our speaker today is a very unique personality, and this is why we're happy to welcome him here. His name is Mike Ousdigian. Some of you recognize that last name. Two of his grandchildren are students here. He comes to us out of a unique background. I don't want to go into all the details because I'm hopeful that he will share this with you. I will just mention a couple of them. Many of you who are good history students perhaps can go back to the early part of the century in your memory to the Turkish massacre in which literally thousands of people were killed by the Turks, most of them Armenians. His family was a part of that terrible tragedy in history. He was taken away as a slave, and his background goes a long ways before most of us. But I want to welcome him today as one who has been given a year and a half ago by our governor a very special day in his honor in Minnesota. And he has also received innumerable other awards through the years for his participation in community affairs. And so let's give him a warm Minnehaha welcome, Mr. Ousdigian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. And I appreciate this invitation to appear before this wonderful audience here today to tell them about my problems that I went through in my childhood days, and then tell them what this wonderful country of ours did for me and rehabilitated me and gave me all the education that I needed to make myself a valuable citizen of this great nation of ours. It is very important for all of us to know that America is the greatest nation in the world today. You are a part of 62 million American youth. And I am proud to be here and congratulate you that you are an important segment of the citizenry of this great nation of ours. Yes, it is with great pleasure that I'm going to charge you with the responsibility of the affairs of this country. I shall call you that you are the trustees of the United States of America. That means that we are committing in your hands the welfare, the safety, the preservation of the Constitution of this great nation of ours. I hope you will accept that responsibility. You see, I was not as fortunate as 62 million American youth in my boyhood days, where I was subjected to one of the most horrible massacres in the annals of human history, a massacre that annihilated the lives of 1.5 million Armenians, Christian Armenians, including my parents. It was on June 15, 1915, when 5 gendarmes came in with their bayonets fixed. They knocked at our door. My mother got up from the bed, hurriedly opened the door, and they came in and they showed a proclamation to my mother saying, "Get ready as quickly as possible and fall in line." And then they took us away, 4 sisters and myself, and they spread us and put us in high school basement buildings. That was on June 15, 1915. I was shoveled in the basement of a high school building with 350 other boys of about my age. I was about 13 and a half years old. On the second day of our stay in that building, a gendarme came in with his bayonet fixed and hollered for my name. And I did not know what to do. I said goodbye to the boys to my right and to my left. Apparently, I said, my number is up. I shall never see you anymore. He got hold of my arm. He says, you just follow me. We cut through the schoolyard, great big schoolyard. At the end, there were rocks, and underneath was a river. I thought he was going to stick me with his bayonet and throw my body into the river, because it so happened that my parents were well-to-do people, and my dad was a very well-educated person. So as we cut through the yard, slowly following him, very close to him, and I could see some movement at the end, but I could not tell what they were. But when I got very close, of course, I knew that they were my beloved parents. Their hands were tied in the back. They could not embrace me. They began to cry. I fell and I hugged them, and my dad looked at me and said, son, we shall never see you anymore in this world, he said. There is an order here that they're going to kill us within 15 minutes from this part of the city. But he said, I want you to remember one thing. He says, never give up your faith in God, he said. And if by God's will, he said, someday you may find yourself in the United States of America. You see, he knew about United States that was a free country. Remember one thing and one thing only. He said, never give up your faith in God. And if you have to die penniless, he said, die penniless, but die an honest man. Those were the precious words by my beloved parents. I have never forgotten that. Then the gendarme pulled me from my shoulder, says, come on, your time is up. He brought me and shoveled me with the other kids, and he shut the door. After 2 days, 55 gendarmes came in, and they took us out of that building and put us on that so-called highway number 1 to be slaughtered to death. Day in and day out, we used to march without hardly anything to eat. There was nothing to eat. It was a summery day. Most of the kids did not have proper clothing, did not have their shoes on. They were snatched away from their parents and shoveled in that basement. It took us 12 days to reach that so-called final destination. Now listen to this. That final destination day meant that from that point on, they have no control over these Armenians, refugees, and that the terrorists were coming in and taking them away, and they were slaughtering them. Now that's the way the dictators do. The point was that when we reached to that final destination point, out of 350 boys, 100 of them were already slaughtered and their bodies thrown into the river. During that period, fortunately, our President Wilson had instructed his ambassador, Henry Morgenthau, in the city of Constantinople or Istanbul, to try to reason out with Turkish government and plead with the government not to kill the kids, children, and womanhood. The only success Mr. Morgenthau had was that the proclamation came to the villagers and farmers in that area saying that you can take these kids as slaves if you so wish. So when they put us in that concentration camp, after 12 days of marching, only 250 of us, the farmers began to come in and ask the kids if they wish to be their slaves. During that period, I was sitting on a rock. The kids were climbing the hills, trying to pull down the wild hazelnut to put it on their empty stomach. Hunger is a very bad thing. And one of the kids stepped on a rock. The rock came in and hit me on my head, and I was bleeding. I was going to bleed to death. And do you know, an elderly gentleman with great big beard approached me and said, do you wish to be my slave? How could I say no when my side vision I could see Armenian bodies floating into the river? Innocent bodies killed and their bodies thrown into the river. I said, yes, I want to become your slave, and he got hold of me. We got out of the gate, And do you realize that I was the last boy to be taken away as a slave? Out of those 250 boys, 225 of them were taken away about half a mile from that point, and all their bodies were buried in one great big well. When I got out, I am bleeding. I don't know why the man came to me when there were so many other nice kids there that they were not bleeding. He went into his pocket. He came up with a handful of tobacco, and he plastered over my head. Do you know, he stopped bleeding and he saved my life. He took me before the mayor's office. They asked me who I am, where I come from, and what is my name and all that, and I told him, well, he says, we won't be able to accept you as a slave. We have to change your name. So they changed my name from Oksent Ousdigian to Mustafa Edip Seferogli. And I signed the document, and I became the property of my captor. He took me to his home. The first thing he did, he called me in a little room. He had 11 grandchildren. He said to me, you know, I know you are a Christian, but he said, if I ever hear you to say one word about Christ to one of my grandchildren, he says, put your tongue out. I had to put my tongue out. The Turks carry a 18-inch bayonet under their arms. He took that bayonet out of the leather case. He says, put your tongue out, and I did it. He says, I'll cut your tongue. You can imagine that fear, that horror, that terrible moment that I shall never forget as long as I live, which happened some 65 years ago. And he put me to work day and night, day and night. One time he called me in, and he said that I have a heavy load over here to be carried to a certain destination. I went into the barn, I got my saddle and came out and put the saddle on a tree stump, put the load over here, put the ropes around my shoulders, and I began to proceed to deliver the goods. I came across the steep hill. The load was so heavy on my back, every time I took one step forward, I couldn't gain the traction. I was pulled back about twice that far. So finally I began to get hold of some tree stumps to give me the strength to go forward. And it worked. When I was climbed on 3/4 of the hill, the last tree stump I got hold of was grown on a rock. The root was loose. It came off, and I rolled down the hill. When I tried to stand up, I had a broken ankle. I gathered the goods together, limping running over to my captor, and I asked him what happened. I had a terrible accident. He says, I don't care what happens to you. He says, I cannot afford to have you lie down about 8 or 10 days to have your broken ankle taken care of. I want you to go back and deliver the goods. That's the difference. When people lack faith in their God, when they treat human beings like piece of merchandise, that's what is happening on the other side of the high seas today. That's why America today has become the hope of the world, because American people have hearts. American people are generous. American government operates under our Constitution, and they are out with the consent of American people to help people everywhere in the world. So I went back. You can imagine the pain, the suffering I went through. Finally, when the Russian army came there about in the latter part of 1916, the Lord was with me, and let me tell you that while the man threatened me not to say one word about Christ to his grandchildren, I never forgot to pray to my Lord to get me out of that slavery. I used to go and hide myself in great big trees, and say my prayer silently and go out and do my work, working 18 to 20, sometimes 22 hours a day there was no place to sleep anyway. So I was released from slavery. Russian army soldiers got hold of me, and they brought me near the general's headquarters. and they put us in a International Red Cross wagon, and they sent us to the city of Trebizond, where I was born. Of course, there was no parents who were gone. I had a cousin over in Russia. He sent for me, and I left latter part of 1917, and I went to Russia. As you know, in November 1917, Russia began to fight their own fight, killing one another. They became communists. Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Bolsheviks were the communists and Mensheviks were the conservatives. They fought for about 5 years, and finally communists dominated, and they have been operating under communistic rules for the past 62 years. So my cousin got hold of a doctor. This doctor came in and put my broken ankle into a cast. He tied it from the ceiling, and I lay down 5 consecutive months. And we had a very fine Russian lady, our neighbor. My cousin was not a married man. There was no housewife. She made me her project. Now let me tell you one thing at this before I go ahead, that Russian people are very fine people, very hospitable, very good people. But unfortunately, they gave up their freedom, and they are captives of their own government today. This lady used to come visit me every day, bring me some book. I learned how to read Russian book and speak little bit Russian, and they got me a mandolin, in my bed. I start playing mandolin to myself to keep me busy. One day she came in and said that my son will be graduating from Moscow University. As soon as he comes in, I'm going to bring him over so that we can converse with him, and he will give you a lot of current events. I said, that will be just fine. After several days, they walked in. The young man, I was graduating with honors. He had all kinds of decorations on his coat. We conversed together, back and forth, and the mother excused herself and went over to prepare the evening meal. Now, these are interesting things, you people should know. American youth should know. And after 10 minutes, her son left. He says, I'll see you tomorrow. We shook hands, and he left. Do you know, after an hour and a half, I heard 2 revolver shots. His younger brother was drafted in the Communist Army, and his brain was washed. He was told to hate religion. He was told to hate education. He was told to hate anything that was honest, but worship communistic doctrine. As the young man comes home, he took a look at his brother. Mother sitting in the parlor. Mother excused herself to go into the kitchen, according to the story, and the young man pulled the revolver and shot his own brother because he was an educated young man. Just think what that means, what class division can do to people, how people can change their minds and become enemies even to their own parents or to their own brothers. That shall not happen in the United States of America. Finally, as you know, American gallant boys crossed the high seas in April 1917 and came all across the high seas, and Germany was forced to sign on the dotted line, and we had that armistice. I am sure you read that in your history books. November 11, 1918. I received a telegram from Istanbul from my oldest sister. She took a chance and sent a telegram through the Red Cross to see if I am alive. Maybe I am with my cousin. I got the telegram. I wired back and told her that I am physically very ill. She should do something to come back and get me so that we can sail back to the Istanbul and see what we can do with the help of God. She came in the latter part of 1919, and we sailed for the city of Istanbul. They put me in a hospital over there. Doctors came in and operated on my ankle. It was too late to reset. Finally, they had to amputate my left limb 7.5 inches below the knee. And because of the merciless heart of that one individual, I became a crippled boy at the age of 20. Then, as I said, we never forgot to pray to God to bring us to the United States of America. And that glorious day came when on March 11, 1921, three sisters and I entered the United States of America. As I was sitting in one of the corners of the city of New York and see all the activities there, great big buildings, I said to myself, what am I going to do here? I was a sickly boy. I was a crippled boy. I could not speak one word of English. I did not have any money. I did not have any parents. I did not have any friends. But you see, when some 360 years ago, American founding fathers left the European shores and came to America, they brought with them one high ideal, and that was a fervent faith in God. Through this faith, for 155 years, they struggled. They fought. They were massacred. They massacred. Finally, on July 4, 1776, they brought forth that wonderful Constitution, that which we all remember. It says on the second paragraph of this Constitution that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let me pause here for a minute. Many nations on the other side, they have constitution. Life is a gift from God. Pursuit of happiness. Every single individual, 5 billion people in the world, wish to have pursuit of happiness. What the other countries' constitution lack is that very precious word, liberty. They do not have liberty to make progress, to advance their education, their science in every way possible. The thing that makes American Constitution the greatest document in the world, consisting of some 7,000 words, is that word liberty that you young people have. That's why, I repeat, I am charging you as trustees of the United States of America, so that as you grow and you enter in business world and you assume that responsibility to preserve the contents of our Constitution. It's a great piece of document that has ever been written by any human mind or hand, political document that has ever been written by any human mind or hand, that Declaration of Independence that came for the sole purpose of bringing peace and tranquility. Now, the first job I had, and I had an artificial limb, it wasn't well built. The first job I had was washing dishes in the city of Minneapolis for 12 cents an hour. Then I started working, going to school during nights, graduated from high school in 1928, went to city of Philadelphia, enrolled in the Horton School of Accounts and Finance, and I graduated with scholarship in 3 years, and my profession was an accountant. Why do I say all these things? Had I stayed on the other side of the high seas, all I could do, my very good friends, sit on a corner as a crippled boy and beg a nickel from the passerbys to make a living. Here in the United States of America, I have everything because of the Constitution and because of the generosity of American people. In view of the fact that the American Constitution still functions and operates upon Christian principles. This beautiful universe of ours has been divided into two separate divisions. One division is led by Russia. Russia, dominated by men without conscience and faith in God, is seeking to impose upon the rest of the world their tyranny, to make them slaves and revive government by hatred, by exile, by mass persecution and starvation. The other division, oh yes, the other division, my very good friends, is led by the United States of America. The United States government, backed by the people of these United States, and in conformity with the provision of our Constitution, is aiming to preserve the integrity and vitality of a free society founded upon the dignity, worth, and freedom of the individual. Today, the entire world, including communistic Russia, recognizes the fact that the only obstacle to the annihilation of human freedom and Christian faith from the face of the earth has been the United States of America, which means you, the free American people. Every important nation on the other side of the high seas has broken its promises to mankind. Consequently, faith has been hurt, hope has been diminished, thinking has been corrupted, and fear has been spread all over the world. On the other hand, the provisions of our Constitution prevail upon us to think of humanity everywhere. They enable us to better the ideals of man. Hence, because of the Constitution, we have courage. We take risks. We readjust. We can protect ourselves because we are free under God. Today, the world stands on the brink of destruction. Communism is advancing everywhere in the world. America is prepared to fight communism and stop that menace, taking other free nations with it, because today America is the strongest nation politically, economically, spiritually. That's why I say to you that you are the trustees of a nation that is the hope of the entire world. With many problems facing us daily in this perplexing and trying era, it is of paramount importance that we safeguard the perpetuity of our Constitution. For in the provisions of this most exclusive and priceless heritage lies our chance to attain and hold the American idea of liberty, justice, Christian faith, and opportunities for all. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
I think I'm sure you sense what that applause is saying. Thank you, and you're dismissed.